Hello, and welcome to our third class in the examination of the biblical book of Ruth. Tonight, as we begin chapter 3, let me remind you of the events that have brought us up to this point. The story begins with a man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi. They live in the city of Bethlehem. Hard times come upon the land. If you read the Tanakh, the Old Testament, you'll see that the Jews and their God had a love-hate relationship. That is, they would serve him, and they would acknowledge him, and they would obey him, and then they would marry some more Canaanite women. And the next thing you know, they would be building Asherah poles and altars to these strange gods of the Canaanites, and so God would have to punish them again. Well, this was one of those periods of times. We read about 13 famines in biblical time in the land of Israel. This time, Elimelech gathers his wife. They have two boys, Mahlon and Chilion, and the four of them trudge eastward from Bethlehem. And they're Epaphrathites, that is, they're from the clan that is of Judah, that is down surrounding Bethlehem. Messiah Yeshua, the one called Jesus, was also an Epaphratite. So the four of these leave their home and go eastward toward the land of Moab. Now, we would call Moab southern Jordan. Regardless of what you call it, it is not a very pleasant place. It is a place now where you can drive for miles and miles and miles and not even see a weed living. It was a similar desolate place in biblical times. It was not a pleasant place then. It was never lush. But apparently what was to offer there was better than could be had in all of southern Israel. And so Elimelech leaves. We don't know the period of time exactly, but it was apparently a short period of time after they entered the land. Their two sons found wives, Orpah and Ruth, and married them. Within 10 years, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, and her two sons, husbands to her daughters-in-law, also die. And she, at about that same time, hears that the Lord has relinquished and has resent the reins to Israel, and so she decides to get up and return to her native land. Now, her two daughters-in-law accompany her. When they've gotten about to the borderland between Moab and Israel, Naomi attempts to send her daughters-in-law back to their families, back to their lands, back to their gods, telling them to find husbands there and be provided for in their old age. One of them, Orpah, takes her advice and heads back to her family. But the other, Ruth, gives an impassioned speech to Naomi, explaining to her that no, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, your God will be my God. Where you live, I will live, and where you die, there will I die and also be buried. So we see that Ruth has made an acceptance both of the Lord, the God of the Israelites. You know, all Christians worship the God of the Israelites, right? So she made that commitment in her life, and she also committed to become a Jew. And essential in those days to being a Jew was keeping the Mosaic Law. She apparently familiarized herself quite well with it, as we'll find later on. So as we begin chapter 3, they're settled back in the land of Israel. They're settled back in Bethlehem. Now, Naomi, who probably, her husband, her deceased husband, Elimelech, probably owned property, but that property had apparently been ransomed off. You know, God set up the tribes and gave the tribes their lands in Israel. He also, within these tribal lands, gave individual parcels to families. And his plan was that that land and those families would remain united for eternity. In fact, he says it is impossible to sell your land. You cannot sell your land utterly. You can only lease it out. If you hit upon hard times and you need money and you have land, you can lease it out. But at the end of the Jubilee period, which is a 50-year period, when the year of Jubilee comes, all properties must be returned to their original family owners. And all indentured servants must be given their liberty to return to their place and live the rest of their lives. And so Naomi, we don't know at what point she is in this 50-year cycle, but it appears that it's far enough off that she can't really plan around waiting for the year of Jubilee to happen. And so she settles down, and we're not sure exactly what circumstance or where they managed to find a place, if it's a shack, if it's a hut, maybe if it's with a relative, but Ruth goes to live with her mother-in-law, and as we begin chapter 3. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for." 2. Now Boaz, with whose women you have been working, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. What is winnowing barley and what is a threshing floor? Well, when the grains are cut down, they are attached, the grains as heads are attached to stalks. You don't want the stalks, you don't want the sheaf, you don't want those woody parts that surround it. You just want the plump kernels of grain. So you'll take the grains that you've cut up to a threshing place, which is always the highest point in the village, so that it get wind, hopefully from all different points of the compass. And first you thresh the wheat, you beat the stalks to try and separate the grains from the stalks. Then you take your pitchfork and throw that up in the air. The idea being that the wind will come along and blow the chaff outside and the grains will fall. This is how you collected your grains. It was a happy time. Harvest was always a happy time. It was in association with religious times of year. As an example, the barley harvest happens in the spring around Passover. And the grain harvest happens in the fall around Shavuot, which is also the day of Pentecost. So the days of these harvest festivals, they made quite a big deal out of it. We see that Boaz, who owns these fields but probably resides in Bethlehem, comes out and works with the workers, brings his sleeping bag, and he sleeps with the workers. They eat when the winds have died down at night and they can no longer be effective in separating the grain from the chaff. Then they'll all have a big feast. There'll be roasted grains, there'll be olives, there might probably be figs and apricots. There would be some yayin, some wine making its way around. There would be a lot of festivity because this was a happy time that God had given them another successful harvest. And so Boaz is going to go out into his field, and Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, begins to put 2 and 2 together and figure things out. Again, verse 2. Now Boaz, with whose women you have been working, this is Naomi speaking to Ruth, on the threshing floor. 3, she instructs Ruth, she says, "Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go up to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking." 4, when he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Now, lest you think that Naomi is giving her daughter-in-law advice to go and do an immoral thing, rest your mind from that thought. These people were very, very prudent. They were very, very against licentious behavior. There was no such thing as premarital sex allowed in any circumstance. And in fact, teenagers, young people, were not even allowed to date. All of that had to be done by a process in an orderly fashion. And Naomi is not telling Ruth to go up and seduce your boyfriend Boaz, but what she is telling her to do is this. When the men and the families relocate to the fields for the harvest festival, once in the evening when the winds stop blowing, the men will sleep around the harvest floor, with their heads all toward the grain and their legs extending out like spokes from a wheel. And they'll keep their blanket at night. Barley harvest is in the spring and it's often chilly. They'll keep a blanket down at their feet, and when it gets chilly later that night, they'll reach down and pull that blanket up over them. That was their version of a sleeping bag. So Naomi is instructing Ruth. She says, go and lie at his feet. In other words, go and lie there under those covers where you see he's going to be. Later in the middle of the night, announce your presence, and he and you will figure something out. Verse 5, I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. 6, so she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. 7, when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. 8, in the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. 9, "Who are you?" he asks. Bear in mind, it's dark. He has maybe had a good glass of wine earlier in the evening, and he's a little confused and a little unsettled, and he wonders, who in the world is this? She answered, "I am your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer to our family." Now, this term, guardian redeemer, in Hebrew is goel, goel. And a better translation than guardian redeemer is kinsman redeemer, because it is a kinsman. Who is he redeeming? What is he redeeming? Well, in the case where a family has a situation where they run across hard times, and perhaps the man has to lease out all of his property, perhaps he's had some crop failures, perhaps he's developed a habit for wine. For whatever reason, if he has to lease that property out, he may well contact his family and say, "Look, you know what, I've had to lease out our ancestral home, and would one of you be willing to come down and redeem it, pay the money and get it back from this man so that I can be returned and our family heritage can be returned to our family?" That is a kinsman redeemer. It's an unusual practice. We find out about this way back in the Torah, in Leviticus
chapter 25, I believe, verse 25.
We read about this unusual law. Further, we are led to understand that in the Hebrew culture, the woman has the right, if her husband dies and they are childless, the woman has the right, in fact the obligation, to go to one of his brothers and say, "Look, your brother has died without leaving a child to continue his name in the land of Israel, so I am selecting you to be the Goel. You must come and be my husband. You must protect me. You must provide for me. We should have children. We will name them. The first son shall be named in your brother's honor." It is quite an honor, but sometimes it's inconvenient to the man. So the woman and the woman only has the right to select which relatives she would want to be with. And if she asks the man to perform this vital function and he refuses, then it says in Torah, she shall remove one of his sandals and spit in his face and announce to the elders, "This is what happens when a man of Israel will not honor his father, his brother, and keep his household built." So this is quite an unusual situation. We understand that in Israel, women had rights, and this is a very clear demonstration of them. We know that Boaz is in love with Ruth. Now, Ruth has announced to Boaz that she wants him, she selects him to be the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, to come and save her. And just as an aside, we have selected Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel, called Jesus in our day, to be our kinsman redeemer. That's why he came down and paid for us with the only coin that would suffice given the sins that we've committed, and that was at the cost of his blood. Verse 10, this is Boaz speaking to her. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier, for you have not run away after the younger men, whether rich or poor." 11. "And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All of the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character." 12. "Although it is true that I am a Goel in our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and if in the morning he wants to do his duty as your kinsman redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning." 14. "So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, 'No one must know that the woman came to the threshing floor.'" Women are not allowed on the threshing floor. 15. "He also said, 'Bring me the shawl that you were wearing and hold it out.' When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. He then went back to town," that is the town of Bethlehem. 16. "When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, 'How did it go, my daughter?' Then she told her everything that Boaz had done for her, 17, and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. 18, then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. You know, it was the time that she was going to be redeemed. The situation had come, God had worked out all the details in advance, and now came the time to make the commitment. The same is true in our walk with Messiah. A lot of us recognize him by God, you can tell by the words that we speak. But can other people tell that when they look at our lives? Do they see us bearing the kind of forgiveness that would forgive a man who's pounding a spike through their ankle? Have we made the kind of commitment that Paul tells us in Romans 10:9, where he says, say with your mouth, Yeshua is Lord, and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, then you will be saved. I'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and hope to see you on our next and final version and the installment study of the book of Ruth. Thank you.